So I'm doing two men's groups actually, one for more experienced guys that have either been in therapy or have been to men's groups before. The intention of that is more of an open process group where I use my facilitation skills to help guys go deep and navigate their blocks to vitality or blocks to manifesting things that they want to manifest in their life. Usually there's and also it's a communication training, but more so the other group, which is a more structured training. It's an 8-week training and it's more structured, and that's where the guys will get like a communication training, conflict resolution techniques. It's much more structured. So that's an 8-week process. Guys enter in for the whole 8 weeks, whereas the other one, it's called Ignyte, is more of a drop-in session for guys. And both of them are really designed to support men in coming out of isolation, if isolation is their issue, developing emotional intelligence, which always a good thing really for business and for life and for relationships, and really just to increase their vitality and to be more in line with their mission in life. So participation for the drop-in group is, as I said, this is a more less structured approach, which means that really what I'm doing is I'm looking for themes that are emerging in the group with whatever the men bring. And usually it's the case that a theme arises in the group. It's actually quite interesting how themes just seem to naturally emerge. And I've been trained and have a lot of experience in kind of drawing out those themes and then working with a guy or two in an open process manner to kind of be an example for the group, so that one or two guys get supported in going really deep. And because it's a theme that's emerging in the group, the guys that aren't able to be supported by me in a facilitated process, they kind of get the benefit from having somebody else work through the theme that is emerging in the group. So only one or two guys get a chance to do that. And that sort of work is in the other group, which is called the Connection Crucible, or the Crucible of Connection. That's the 8-week, more structured program. And there is work like that, not until kind of the middle, like session number 4 or something like that, because there needs to be a mutual language for growth and some communication training. And, so it's more of an educational format, especially for the first few weeks in the Crucible of Connection. After the first 4 weeks, then there's more of this kind of open process style facilitation. Yeah, it's not just me that's supporting, especially in the Ignyte group, there's me supporting men in being able to support other guys. And in the more structured training, Crucible of Connection, there's a bit of that, but again, not until later on, after there's been support and some education around supporting other guys, because there's some simple language things that need to be collectively understood. Usually we have this kind of poor habit, all of us, of kind of offering advice too much and outside of context, and there's a way that that language can be tweaked and people can be educated to give that advice in a particular way at particular times in a more emotionally intelligent way. Basically, any man 20 and over, drawing the line at 20 because I just want guys that are a little bit more mature for this. So, and I'm really looking for diversity. I want to get men from all walks of life, different ethnic backgrounds, different careers. As much diversity is, the more diversity, the better. So in my 20s, I ran into men's work, and it was really formative for me in my growth process, my healing process. And because it was so formative to me, and then later I did leadership trainings in this community called Mankind Project, which is a really big community of men worldwide, and they kind of specialize in training men to facilitate. And I experienced so many magical moments of change in that community. But I also started to see over the years that there was a kind of old-fashioned patriarchal quality to the community. Even though they taught about the patriarchy and tried to flatten the hierarchy, I wanted to offer offer something better, something like more updated, something that brings the work further. And I think that's, informed by my PhD work, which my dissertation involved a lot of inquiry into male psychology and narcissism. As it turns out, us men tend to be a bit more narcissistic than women, and I mapped that out a fair bit in my research, in my PhD dissertation. So really it was just a passion to bring the work further, and that's why I'm up to this. Why do men hide their feelings, and how does it sabotage them? Well, a lot of this is just cultural baggage. You could call it the be a man box. In that box, usually, things are changing a little bit, but in general, of course, it's this idea that if a man cries or shows his vulnerability, that makes him weaker. So the taboo emotion for men is grief and sadness and, vulnerability, whereas for women, it tends to be rage and anger. And why do they hide the grief? Well, for exactly that reason, because of the be a man box. If you show that you're vulnerable, if you show that you're sad, or if you cry publicly or something like that, you're often seen as less than, not as strong. Of course, there's all sorts of pejorative terms and whatnot if a man goes there. And how does that sabotage him? Well, it often is most obvious in his interpersonal relationships, his intimate relationships, where the be a man box really becomes problematic for intimacy, for going deeper. And by holding to a sort of rigid structure, then relationship ends up having a ceiling, or it ends up having all of these limitations insofar as understanding why an issue is happening. Let's say that there's a conflict, and men tend to be the ones that are called stonewallers. So stonewalling means that they're the withdrawing part of the relationship. Usually there's an approacher and a withdrawer, and men tend to be kind of percentage-wise the withdrawers, the stonewallers, and that's an image of rigidity. Whereas grief, being in touch with grief and vulnerability, really helps to loosen things up in relationship. It helps to soften blame dynamics. It helps to soften this stonewalling thing. And then you really have a picture of a workable alliance, a workable relationship over time that deepens, as opposed to being rigid and all of that. So really, getting in touch with grief is essential. I see that as being essential in achieving psychological maturity as a man.